Hi, I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman. Thank you for watching our show tonight. Tell you frankly, it's going to be fascinating discussion here this evening because I'm going to bring up different forms of eating tonight and compare them to give you some idea in this confusion out there. As you know, I've been a neurosurgeon 44 years, and I just retired July 1, and I took on the job as medical wellness director at Lutheran Hospital. Tonight's speech here, frankly, is my opinion, and if you're going to change the way you eat, you may need to check with your doctor. But I think you'll be fascinated by what I'm about to say. Let me take a few minutes, though, to begin with, because I've written 15 books on wellness. So let me tell you about where I'm coming from to begin with, and then we compare it to the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, the Mediterranean diet, and be open-minded about it. And just to give you some food for thought. This will be very interesting. Generally, I come from the works of Dean Ornish and Esselstyn and Bernard and McDougall, a plant-based diet, not 100%, but at least the way I speak about it, I say about 80% a plant-based diet. And we'll put up my food pyramid to give you some idea where I'm coming from. What I'm really saying, as you can see on the screen, complex carbohydrates are at the bottom, not refined carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates. You can see cabbage and beets and tomatoes and peppers. In the next column, you'll see fruit, and then next to that, you'll see beans, and above that, you'll see some nuts, and then you see some sweet potatoes and some regular potatoes and some corn, and you'll see meat at the top. And what I'm saying is I don't recommend eating a lot of animal meat. I didn't say eat zero, but I'm saying animal products are not your friend. Why is that? Because they have cancer factors. They have too much fat in them and lead to bad health. And we'll discuss that in some detail as we go on. So I call this a plant-based, nutrient-dense diet based on vitamins, minerals, 25,000 phytochemicals. Yes, plant chemicals that fought off diseases as they were plants, and they will fight off diseases when they're in our body. It's the chemistry, their interaction, their symphony, their mosaic, their rainbow of interaction that lead to good health. And you can look at that pyramid. The pyramid is already at the Boys and Girls Club on Fairfield and Pontiac. It's at Trine University. It'll be hopefully at Lutherans for too long, and at some other universities in the city that are looking at it. I'm trying to create a culture of health. A culture of health. We need to change because we're eating the mad, sad, toxic American diet, and it's making us sick. Let's go back in history a little bit about how the ancients ate, for example. And the reason really that we're having this health problem is what we're eating is reacting to our genetic history, to our genes. You see, our genes don't change but 0.2% about every 40,000 years. So we have the same genetic structures as the ancients, essentially. And the food we're eating doesn't play well with our genetic structure. That's why we're seeing tremendous rates of heart disease, vascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, because our genes just can't take it. And but let's look back in time, the paleo diet, for example. About 2.5 million years ago, we had Homo sapiens. They were mainly plant eaters. If you read Jane Brody's book, good food book, she has search history, and we have skeletons, and we look at the teeth structure, and I think we were mainly plant eaters. Now, if you read the Paleo Diet by Cordain, now he will claim they were more meat eaters than that. But again, we need to look at the dental structures, the bowel structure. And about 1.5 million years ago, we have Homo erectus, and they can now pretty well prove by teeth structure that they were plant and animal eaters. And then we have Cro-Magnon man about 300,000 years ago, and they were able to examine some frozen feces and find out that they were eating about 100 different types of plants. They also studied about 3,000 years ago, they studied the skeletons in Texas, and they find their tooth structure, their bone structure was consistent with being mainly plant eaters. Then in Michigan, University studied skeletons going back about 5,000 years ago, and found they were mainly eating berries and fruits, and were mainly eating foods rich in vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. And then that, I think, hits the history pretty good. There's some disagreement about that. No question about it. There's no question about it. But you just think about it a minute. Just let's use our eyes a little bit. Who are the biggest vegetarians around here? The elephants, the giraffe, the hippopotamus. They're vegetarians. And they have similar bowel structure to us. The chimpanzee, the gorillas, they're vegetarians. They're huge. So anybody tries to say that you got to have my protein, I got to eat the animal protein to be large, that's totally phony. You can be extremely large, a living thing, animal or human, and eat a totally plant diet. Matter of fact, the American Dietetic Association published a paper saying that a well-balanced vegetarian diet is completely consistent with excellent health in children and adults. That's a published paper. Let's look at the bowels a minute too. Let's look at a meat eater, the lion. He's got a 4-foot bowel, okay? He eats some meat. His tooth structure is such he can just tear it. He's not grinding it. He's tearing it apart. Goes in the stomach. What's the stomach got in it? Essentially, it's sulfuric acid, and on a 4-foot bowel, and it's rapidly absorbed. But they live a very short life. Yeah, those meat eaters lead a very short life. Us humans have over 20 feet of bowel. So does the chimpanzee. So do the large plant eaters. Wouldn't that pretty well prove to you that in history we were plant eaters? We are not mainly meat eaters. So when you see them claiming in the Atkins book and the Paleo Diet that we were mainly meat eaters, I tend not to think so. But that can be a different opinion, and I totally respect that. Also, they studied about 58 tribes, ancient tribes that still existed in the last 100 years, and they found that 2/3 of what they consumed was high-dense nutrient plants, and only 1/3 about animals. But they were consuming different animals. The animals they were consuming years ago were eating different food. They were eating grass. Their chemical structure is totally different than the beef we're eating today. The chemical structure is totally different and has a lot different effect on our body. Their chemistry is not the same. So let's speak a little bit here now about the Paleo Diet. Excellent book. I'd like you to read it. The Paleo Diet. All these books that I don't completely necessarily agree with. That's just my opinion. There's a lot to be learned there. Dr. Cordain, I think, wrote an excellent book. And what is he mainly recommending? Remember that about 10,000 years ago, we started farming, we started growing grains, we started domesticating animals. So what we are eating is totally different. So we've developed tremendous rates of heart disease, vascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, dementia. Things are related a lot to what we eat because what we're eating, our body is revolting to it. because our genes are not consistent with that. So in the Paleolithic diet, they don't recommend dairy. I myself don't either. There's no reason for a child to be drinking milk after age 2. Before that, of course, mother's milk is the most healthy because of omega-3. The essential fatty acid causes tremendous brain growth. But after age 2, we don't have to drink milk. The casein that can cause cancer, type 1 diabetes, the proteins in it are not very healthy. There's a lot of fat in milk. Although certainly you could drink low-fat milk. We don't need it for calcium. You get plenty of calcium off plants. That's just false advertising. We don't need milk for calcium. You can get it off plants. Sesame seeds are the highest source of plants. In the paleo diet, they don't recommend cereals because they are refined. We took the bran, the covering, and the germ off the plants, and we're eating nothing but sugar. We're eating pure sugar. So the only sugar the ancients ate really was some honey, and that was only at certain times of the year. And then the paleo diet, they recommend lean animal foods. Certainly, animals were a lot leaner in years ago, but they were eating grass. They were eating grass. They were not eating what we're doing today. The corn products that genetically modified, they're full of herbicides and pesticides and petroleum products. And when you eat beef today, that's what you're eating. You're eating a beef that's been in a cage, force-fed corn products, and giving extra fat to fatten it up quickly. See, when they keep an animal in a cage like that, they can get that beef to get tremendously fat, and then they kill it, and you eat it. And of course, what you were eating is what the animal ate. I mean, what the animal ate. So, and in a Paleolithic diet, a high fiber diet, and a high fruit diet, and high vegetable diet. So, in the paleo diet, the majority of things I completely agree with. I mean, high fiber diet, lean animal foods, which I think it's difficult today. Years ago, it was easy, but today, how are you going to find a lean animal food? You eat beef, I don't care how skinny it is. The fat is marbled throughout the beef, and you're going to be eating a high-fat diet. And you're eating a different kind of meat today. It has palmitic acid in it, which is highly causes inflammation in the body, causes cancer, dementia, diabetes, vascular disease. It's a different protein than in lean animals. In this book, there are indeed addresses of places you can get lean animal meat from, so we have to give them credit for that. You can find that in the book. If you want to eat just lean animal meat, you can indeed get it. But to go to the supermarket today, what you're finding there is the typical animal products, been fed corn, and what you're eating really is corn. That is in the pesticides and herbicides, and I hate to even describe to you what they do to an animal before you eat the darn thing. And so it's a different kind of a protein. Although in this very nice book, they're listed, like page 106, for example, the fat and protein content of foods, and that's, I think it's very good. And I'm not opposed to eating some animal products as the meat. We know my food pyramid on top, it has meat on top. For example, skinless turkey is 94% protein, 5% fat. Now, you got to say, that's an excellent source of protein. Although I like to reiterate, though, you don't have to eat animal products to get all the protein you need. You can exist on a plant diet, get all the protein you need. All you need is maybe an extra take a B12 tablet, maybe a little extra iron, and I'm not even sure that's needed. So boiled shrimp is 90% protein, 10% fat. Interestingly enough, we always hear about salmon being so good, but salmon is 62% protein, 38% fat. So it's high salmon. And the salmon that you're eating today, when I go to a restaurant, and say, where did this come from, a farm, or did this come from the ocean? there's maybe 2 or 3 places in Fort Wayne where you can get ocean salmon. Is that rare? You must ask. And some of the fanciest places you think would have this, they don't. So always ask the waiter that, because in essence, when you're eating the majority of the fish, 90% of the fish you get today in a restaurant or in the supermarket is like coming from a feedlot, like a feedlot for beef. Yes, they've been fed corn and corn products and hormones and fat to fatten them up for you to eat them. It is true. 90% is just like eating beef. I can taste the corn in salmon. I can. I've asked other people, they can. Try it sometime, and you'll see it's tasteless. So 90% of fish is like eating beef from a feedlot. Yes, very shameful. Very. I think it's very sad. A hot dog, for example, is 83% fat, 14% protein. Bologna is 15% protein, 81% fat. Are you getting the idea? You need to know the fat percentage on page 106. It's excellent. So I do recommend some meat product. Alaskan king crab legs, which I like. 85% protein, 15% fat, but of course you remember, depends what you put on them. So if you dip it in butter, the thing's gone up a little bit. So, a lot of times I dip these things in olive oil. You can overdo it in olive oil. It's 100% fat. Olive oil is 100%, but it's mainly monosaturated fat, which is a lot healthier, not saturated fat, so it's a lot healthier. I find bread, for example, I dip it in olive oil, and I find it's tasty, and it doesn't seem to affect my weight. In essence, the aspects that I really liked the paleo diet. I was just the other day talking to one of the diabetic doctors, and she hadn't read the book and wondered. She had a patient who lost his pancreas from pancreatitis, and at the university they told him to follow the paleo diet, just boom like that. Well, I think that was fairly good advice, except I think it's too much protein, and it has to follow with instructions. Although the instructions are there in the book, but they're under that diet, though, they recommend as high as 40%, 38% protein diet. I spoke to a lot of papers and books don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And I asked one of the excellent rhinologists at Lutheran Hospital today, I think God provided for me about 1 hour before the show, and I asked him, and he agreed with me that much protein is tough on the liver because it converts to nitrogen, and there's a limit, there's a limit, and that it makes the blood acidic. It affects the kidney, acidic. And acidic blood can lead to disease. There's even a Dr. Young published a paper, and he's come out with another one soon. In fact, I reviewed it for Harper's, called the pH miracle, and he's saying when your body's more acidic, you're more likely to get cancer. That's his opinion, and he has some studies there to prove it. But there can be different opinion about it, but it has been generally accepted, though, that protein is tough on the kidneys. At least if you have kidney disease, you can't eat like this. That even Dr. Atkins agrees to, who has a high-protein diet, except even more heavier than this. How much protein does a person need to eat? If you're in good health and you're inactive, about 0.5 grams per pound of lean body mass, okay? If you're a little more active, 0.6. If you're quite active like myself, who works out, at Species of Planet Fitness 4 days a week, play tennis 3 days a week, and lift weights, etc., I probably need about 1 gram. A much more like a marathon runner might need a little more than that per pound of lean body mass. That's your protein need. 70 to 150 grams a day. A lot of Americans today eating, almost 200 grams of protein a day when they don't need it. And that's tough on the liver. It's tough on the kidneys, as the renal doctor already said. And what Americans are eating is that these animal products carry with them a lot of fat, fat in pork ribs, like 73% fat, for example, and it's not good for your health. And so going on those percentages, again, a paleo diet, protein up to 35%, and maybe 20 to 40% carbohydrates, fat 28 to 47%. So it's a fairly high fat diet, and that in itself isn't the greatest for it because it causes insulin resistance. So like I said, there are good aspects to it, but it's a high protein diet. But it does explain the book very careful to pick your protein. If you were to carefully pick it, and send for some of your meats off these sites, we can get lean, wild, grass-fed beef. You might make out okay, and the corn-fed animals have in them palmitic acid, and this is causes high cholesterol, and corn-fed fish have the same thing in it, not good for your health, high cholesterol, high-fat diet. So avoid fatty processed meats, bacon, hot dogs, for example. The factory farm-fed feedlot meats or agriculture, fish farms, aquaculture fish farms have no resemblance to fish from the Atlantic or from Alaska or from farms where the animals are grass-fed. There's no resemblance. A T-bone, for example, has in it 9 grams of fat. 9 grams of fat. You would have to eat 10 times as much bison meat, wild animals, to get 9 grams of saturated fat. So it goes to show you how much leaner that fat was and how much healthier the chemistry of that food was. This diet, though, does recommend disease-fighting fruits and vegetables like I do in the way I describe, because of the vitamins and minerals and the phytochemicals, 25,000 phytochemicals in their interaction, foods of color, in their interaction, in their mosaic, in their rainbow, and their symphony of interaction lead to good health. They lead to good health. And remember what I mentioned, meat is acidic, and it does that in the kidney, and you have to counterbalance that immediately. Your blood cannot stand any tremendous difference in the pH, and very quickly they will leach some calcium out of the bones to make it alkaline, and that's what leads to osteoporosis. Meat eaters have a much higher rate of osteoporosis than other people, and lean meat, it can be 80-90% protein, so that you got to figure out, what the good meats are, like a lean turkey, for example. Bacon is 75% fat. Bacon is 75% fat, yeah. And it's also said that the how much calories are used up in the metabolism of different foods. It is thought that protein, you lose quite a bit of calories because of the thermic effect of digestion, but the other books don't agree with that. And remember, when you're eating complex carbs with coverings on them, you may be absorbed 70%. You will lose 30% because of high fiber. The fiber is complex sugars that not be absorbed. They won't allow cholesterol in. It's very healthy to eat complex carbohydrates, beets and collards and kale, for example. Kale would be on the nutrient density scale of Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who wrote that famous book, Eat to Live, and End of Diabetes, which my name is on the back cover of that book. We'll say kale, he'd give it 1,000 points. If you go to Whole Foods, for example, there's none in Fort Wayne, but Indianapolis or Chicago or Elkhart now, they'll label the food with nutrient density scores. Kale gets 1,000 points. You can get a hold of a kale salad. It's very healthy because of the nutrients in it. And so the bedrock of the Stone Age diet, they would claim in the paleo diet, is lean meat, fresh fruits, and vegetables. And remember, there's a little difference in what Jane Brody feels and what Dr. Carden feels is the history of what ancients ate, but I tend to lean in Jane's directions because I've read that in other places. So the 7 keys of the paleo diet: lean animal protein, eat fewer carbohydrates, and especially eat complex carbohydrates. Look at the glycemic index. Eat large amount of fiber, at least 50 grams a day. Eat more essential fatty acid type foods, omega-3 types food, which are important. See, we can't manufacture our own essential fatty acids. We have to eat them, like omega-3s. You have to bring them in through either supplements or fish or beans. Or there are some vegetables have omega-3 in them. We need to increase our potassium. Eating banana will bring potassium into your life. And we need to eat a diet with a net alkaline load. Remember we talked about the pH? And we want to have an alkaline type diet, not acidic type diet, which are caused by fatty meats, for example. And so we want to eat foods rich in phytochemicals, vitamins, and minerals. In the supermarket, try to shop on the outside because the fast foods are usually in the middle. Again, to reiterate, the fat content, again, a little bit, or protein content: turkey skinless, 94% protein; shrimp, 90%; chicken breast, 63%. So chicken is not exactly health food. Dr. Furman would say it's like eating a donut. Why? It's a high fat content. Even skinless chicken has a high fat content. Not that you couldn't eat it, once or twice a week. Tuna is about 6 to 8% fat. Cheeses are 28% protein, 70 to 80% fat. So cheeses are not a health food. They're mainly fat. So you need to know the fat content and the protein content of the food you're eating. That's critical. That is critical, no matter how you eat. But what's the American diet? It's a nutritional nightmare. It's a nightmare. Fat, salt, and sugar. Go to any restaurant, look around. Match what people are eating and their body size. It's obvious. It's nothing hidden. I can go to certain restaurants and you can see the matchup. You can see the matchup. And it's very sad because these people are going to die younger. We have a type 2 diabetic rate of 1 out of 3 people at least. We're heading to 1 out of 2, and it's strictly based on their body size. The body size. We're seeing type 2 diabetes in children. Vascular disease starts at age 2. Half the teenagers today have an elevated cholesterol, even some that are skinny. Every teenager should have his cholesterol checked, his triglycerides checked. The pediatricians a lot of times, some doctors a lot of times would check just the ones that have a genetic component to their disease. But genes is not, hereditary is not the major cause of vascular disease. That's only about 2 or 3%, only 2 or 3% at best. It's our reaction of our genes to what you're eating. That's a cause of vascular disease. We have in our body 300,000 miles of blood vessels. That's the microvasculature, 300,000, the distance to the moon. And this is what's affected, for example, type 2 diabetics. That's why they go blind. That's why you get heart disease. That's why they need new kidneys. That's why you get neuropathy. That's why they amputate your legs. It's the microvascular disease. So we have this tremendous opportunity in this country where we have 70 to 100 million people who are pre-diabetic and they don't know it. Their blood sugars are fine. Their blood sugars are fine. but the serum insulin is elevated. We'll speak more about that later. And that's painting the arteries, causing dementia, causing vascular disease. We'll speak more about that later. Sugary drinks in the American diet have a lot to do with obesity. Half obesity is due to sugary drinks. And the reason is it has fructose corn syrup in it. That was invented in 1970. Japanese invented it. It's very, very sweet. And it's cheap. That's why the companies use it a lot in their drinks. It's cheap and very sweet. But let me tell you about the metabolism of fructose corn syrup. It goes through the gut, it's absorbed into the blood. Half of it is sucrose, hits the bloodstream, elevates the insulin level quickly. But the fructose does not elevate the insulin level, and it goes straight to the liver and is rapidly converted to the bad cholesterol, LDL, rapidly converted, not metabolized. That's what makes you fat. That's what makes you fat. And we are consuming these drinks at a tremendous rate all across the world. All across the world. I read a book recently, someone has studied like 10 different cultures, and all across the world. So you need to know fructose metabolism. Drinking sugary drinks, you have to stop it because the fructose goes straight to the liver, is converted to LDL, and is then straight to fat, and become obese and develop insulin resistance and develop diabetes. So you need to know about fructose metabolism. And the major problems in the U.S. diet is too fat, too much salt, and too much sugar. And unfortunately, these products are made cheaper because the U.S. government supports the price of grains and corn and wheat. That makes it so much cheaper. So they grow the corn, and say in the fields of Iowa, 98% is corn now. No fences, no farms, all huge farms. And they make this corn, which has been genetically engineered, and they put petroleum products on it, carbon products on it, herbicides, pesticides to make it grow faster. That makes it cheaper. And they send it to Kansas City and other places, of course. They feed it to the cattle that are in cages, and they don't allow them to move. They don't even remove the feces. The mosquitoes attack it, the bugs attack it, and they kill them with pesticides. They don't remove it, and so in essence, that's what you're eating. You're eating chemicals that have been added to the corn and the wheat, and chemicals that are fed to the beef, and they give them extra fat. They even use chicken litter to feed to the beef because it's full of fat. It's very expensive. Chicken litter is very expensive. And they feed it to the cattle. Kansas City, Kansas, called CAFOs, Concentrated Animal Feeding Organizations. And I don't want to describe to you what happens to these beef to get on your plate. If you have trouble stopping eating because of the science of it, you might consider the cruelty of it. That's up to you. That's up to you. And so we're eating too much in the American diet of the wrong carbohydrates. We're eating processed food. You go to a fast food restaurant, what are you looking at? Processed food. In the world today, Vietnam, Korea have a type 2 diabetes rate higher than us. Why is that? They eat 40% polished rice. They get away with that because they exercised. But now they're eating 30% the American diet, now a 70% bad diet, and type 2 diabetes, obesity is exploding. This New York Times recently, Vietnam has explosive diabetes. Incidentally, while we're on the subject, you can indeed eat the mad, sad, toxic American diet and be perfectly healthy. How is that? Well, there are ethnic groups in this country, and I visited them because I treat a lot of patients. I love to learn about other people. So I visit them. I know of ethnic groups that eat horrible food, but because they work so hard, they wear it off, they're skinny. I visited one of those farms recently. You can guess what kind of farm I was visiting. Wonderful people. The food, to me, was almost unedible. It was white bread. It was white rice. It was pie. Chicken was so fat I could barely eat it. And white bread and butter that had salt in it. But I look at them, they're all skinny because they work very hard. So if you're a marathon runner and you work very hard, you can indeed eat a lousy diet and get away with it. But the problems with us Americans is we're sitting around, most of us, we can't get away with it. I thought I'd throw it out there just out of interest. In 1815, we ate 15 pounds of sugar. Now we're eating 185 pounds of sugar. You need to know about the glycemic index. That is where they took 0 to 100. You can pull it up on the internet, where they look on how quickly the food you're eating rises the sugar level. Okay, like white bread, bingo, that's 100 points. Beans, maybe 30 points, because of fiber. So beans indeed are your friend. So you need to know where things fit on the glycemic index. White rice will be 80, for example. Incidentally, rice with its coverings on it is 70. So it's still not the greatest. A lot of fruits around 30, 25. Some watermelons is very high because it's high sugar, but a lot of water. So watermelon, you can get away with that because it's mainly water. But it's high in the glycemic index. Nuts, incidentally, are quite healthy because of fiber and they're full of protein. So even under this paleo diet, they'll go along with eating some nuts. And farm-raised fish is called aquaculture. And really, in what are these books? What are they saying? They're fed soy and cereal and corn, and they're just like feedlot cattle. Most of the fish you're eating is like feedlot cattle. Same diet, so not healthy. So you got to get it right out of the ocean. You got to get it fresh, and fish is important to us because of omega-3. But you can take a supplement, flaxseed or omega-3 capsules like I take every day, DHA and APA, very healthy because that's an essential fat that you need. Makes your body work better, very healthy. But 90% of the fish we're eating, farm-fed. You got to figure out your way around that. And it's hard to find game meat, but although the sites and the addresses are right here in the Paleo Diet book, I suggest you look at that, for example. Let's go on to now. So in essence, the Paleo Diet, it's a good way of eating, except a bit too much protein. But if you could figure out and get a hold of lean meat and learn what are the high protein foods, don't have much fat in them, you eat this way, I think you're going to do pretty good. I mean, you're going to do pretty good. I'm not going to pick a huge argument with them, and I'm sure a lot of people have done quite well with it, except to eat 35% protein. If it's not good protein, you're going to could have liver trouble, kidney trouble. So be careful. Let's go on to the Atkins diet. We have heard a lot about it, a way of eating, this also. But the one thing I like about this way of eating, he really attacks the sugars and the carbohydrates, but to me, too much. I mean, it's a starvation diet in part, and you hear that discussed quite a bit. But it's a good book to read because all these you can learn something. I recommend reading about it. I read the whole darn thing again this week, and some of the language people used against it. Some people calls the diet a fraud. And I read that in 2 books. I wouldn't say that. But it's extremely high protein. I mean, when I read in there that it's a problem, but they describe what lean meat is there, and if you with a good discussion on protein in there, I don't think there's been any double-blind studies to prove that this diet is good, and people don't talk kindly about it the majority of the time, but there are some people out there I know have done very well on it, but I think it's too high protein. But their discussion on carbohydrates he really, to start the diet, I mean, it's like 20 grams a day, but eventually 40, 50 grams a day, I think is a bit too brutal. The thing is, if you want to lose 10 pounds in a week, eat this way, because you've got 3 pounds of glycogen in your body. Each pound of glycogen has 3 pounds of water. So if you're going to starve yourself, you'll use up the glycogen that's in your muscles and in your liver. That's about 200 grams of glycogen in your muscles and about 60 or 100 grams in your liver. For example, I'm playing a tennis tournament like I did recently at Sweeney. Incidentally, I won the 65 and over, got the trophy, and I came in and I did pretty good with the no age group. So I play tennis too regularly because anybody wondered, did I enter this year? And which I do every year. I noticed, for example, that I played a long match, about 3 hours long. I lost 10 pounds. 10 pounds. Was that true weight loss? No. It was 90% of that water loss because I used up all my glycogen. I used up my 3 pounds of glycogen, and then, of course, I ate it back the next couple of days, and the weight came right back. So if you have a wedding to go to and lose 10 pounds, eat this way. But he doesn't particularly recommend milk products, although will allow cheese, and is pretty generous. Have a steak for breakfast and have so-and-so for lunch. I personally think you're not going to make it on that. That's too much animal products, and today's animal products are not, this is the point, that's not stressed in there enough. These animal products are different than the animal products from years ago. The animal products from years ago had stearic acid in it instead of palmitic acid. They were a lot healthier. They were grass-fed. They were not corn-fed or grain-fed. Totally different type of foods. And there's a great discussion in the book about insulin resistance, and he carefully goes through the amount of protein that we personally need. And I think you're going to way exceed it. People in some of this way of eating will eat 200-300 grams of protein a day. It's too. My opinion is that's too much. And according to the rheumatologist I talked today, it's too much. Makes the blood too acidic. I don't think it'll work for you. Although, again, some people could disagree with that. And he claims there are no scientific studies that prove that this much protein harms your kidney, but that from what I've read and from the doctor I spoke to today, that's not correct. So I think you have to be careful. So the average American eats about 124 pounds of sugar, about 75 grams of fructose, and it is quite emphasized in this discussion in this book. We eat today about 750 calories a day for sugar. That's just too much. It's just too much. That results in insulin resistance, converted to fat, and results in diabetes. They're empty calories. Empty calories means they have no vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals with them. And in the Atkins diet, they're recommended eating a lot of vegetables and fruit. As in the paleo diet, as in the Atkins diet, there's no counting calories here because these chemicals will turn your appetite off. Although in the Atkins diet, they want you to have a carbohydrate counter. There's a table in the book, and you can also get websites for that now, apps on your phone, and keep track how many carbs a day you're eating. They consider that to be very important. And he says sugar is a metabolic poison. I think he's right. This country has an epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes. I think in 5 years we'll have 1 or 2 people who will be type 2 diabetic. There'll be tremendous amounts of vascular disease, and I don't think the country can afford it. No less the illnesses it causes. So here's some tips. Eliminate sugar from the kitchen. Here's a good one. When you're shopping, shop on the outside of a food store so you eat more nutrient-dense foods. Use a carb gram counter. That's a good one. Avoid breakfast carbohydrates, and I think he's got a point there. I've been eating, say, egg white vegetable omelet in the morning. I never gain weight when I do that. Maybe with a fruit cup, for example. Never gain weight doing that. Instead of oatmeal every day, eat oatmeal healthy with the coverings on it. Very healthy. I always say oatmeal is healthy. Oatmeal is healthy, but not 7 days a week, because I don't eat still with the coverings on it. It's going to raise your blood sugar. It's going to raise your blood sugar. Like a vegetarian egg white omelet, I got to think it's very healthy. Some lean turkey for breakfast with a fruit cup, or I sort of believe in juicing in the smoothies, but juicing has no fiber, so it'll raise your blood sugar pretty quickly. So I think it'd be better to drink it still with the fiber in the food. To do smoothies, I think, would be a bit healthier than juicing. Although juicing once a week, big deal. I think it's very healthy because it's concentrated phytochemicals. That has to be very good for you. And I think water is very important. They mentioned that too. We should drink at least 8 glasses of water a week, 2 quarts of daily. We should not, and I'm going to try to develop this as a habit myself. I haven't, but I think I'm getting better at it, to drink a full glass of water before we start to eat. For one thing, it dilates your stomach. You're less likely to eat so much, and it's very healthy, and it'll make your urine more alkaline, your blood more alkaline, less acidic, and it's healthier for you. And so a glass of water before each meal. I put lemon in it as well as lime. Boy, that makes it taste good. That makes it taste good. I really enjoy that. How do you know? Remember I said there's 70 to 100 million people in this country who are pre-diabetic. That is what we should concentrate on. They don't even know they have diabetes. They're painting their arteries. They're having heart attacks. They're putting cholesterol on their 300,000 miles of microvasculature. Matt Hyman wrote a book on sugar solution, and in there, the test that he suggests, and I noticed Dr. Atkins also very nicely suggests, except a little more extensive, that many times when laboratory tests are ordered, they don't check the serum insulin. Serum insulin's what you want checked. Hyman would say fast 8 hours, 75 grams of sugar, you swallow it, then get a fasting insulin level, and then get it at 1 hour and at 2 hours, okay? And the reason you want the serum insulin is your blood sugar may be normal, but your serum insulin is elevated because the insulin is risen. Because what's insulin resistance? Here's one cell, okay? It has receptors on it, and we need oxygen and sugar to make our energy molecule, okay? It's insulin's job to push sugar into the cell. But with these receptors, if there's too much fat on your blood, you're overweight, these receptors become sticky, and insulin cannot push sugar into the cell. That is what's called insulin resistance. I've never had a patient who would explain that to me. It's kind of sad for us doctors, I think. Yeah, kind of sad. You got to know what insulin resistance is. Well, what happens then, the pancreas reacts by secreting insulin like anything to push sugar in there because you need energy. Every cell needs ATP, our energy molecule. Oxygen and sugar makes ATP, okay? So the insulin level in the blood is high. The blood sugar is normal, that's pre-diabetes. That's pre-diabetes, and that needs to be diagnosed because then you can do something about it. Then you can do something about it. We'll discuss that in some more detail. Well, the Atkins diet, they recommend a 5-hour glucose tolerance test, and with serum insulin checked again. Like a fasting insulin, serum insulin should be 19 or less, 1 hour 100 or less, 2 hour less than 60, average figures. You don't need to memorize those. And Dr. Atkins will discuss. He really concentrates on carbohydrates and insulin. I love that part of the book. I love that part of the book because it's accurate. He speaks about 5 stages of diabetes. It's very interesting. You don't hear enough about this. Stage 1, where you develop insulin resistance. I explained to you already what insulin resistance is. That stage 2 is insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, where the insulin really takes up. That'd be stage 2. Type 3, it's insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, plus starting to have some intermittent sugar abnormalities. Sometimes they're up, other times they're not. Depends how much you're exercising. That's stage 3. Stage 4, now we have consistent elevation of blood sugar. Type 2 diabetes now, running with a high insulin level. The sugar's up and the insulin level. And stage 5, guess what? It's like I had somebody visiting me this weekend, and who's type 2 diabetic, always eating the wrong food. He's in my house the weekend, and I can't get him to eat the right food. But all of a sudden, he's thinner. And my initial reaction was, wow, he's watching what he's eating. Well, I watched him eat for 3 days. Let me tell you, he is eating terrible food, okay? At the restaurants, he ordered awful food. And I know now why he's skinny. You know why he's skinny? Because his pancreas is worn out, and he's given himself insulin shots, and he's a type 1 diabetic. A type 1 diabetic no longer can get the sugar to make energy, and he uses up his protein and his fat in his body. He becomes thin. Remember, type 1 diabetic doesn't make enough insulin. Or those kids who have type 1 diabetes, they're all skinny. They're starving to death. This guy is starving to death. That's why he's losing weight. And he thinks it's because he's eating differently, which he definitely is not, because I watched him eat. He didn't understand stage 5. Very interesting. So it is critical that we kill the disease that's in the 70 to 100 million people by getting them to exercise, eat the nutrient-dense diet, skinny them down. They won't get diabetes. Eating carbohydrates that have been stripped of their nutrients is a trail to diabetes. So Atkins diets could help and prevent diabetes to a point, but then there's just a liberal recommendation of eating every darn thing that gets on your plate, including steaks and fish and hot dogs and everything. You just can't do that. You just can't. That's not going to work out. And but it's an excellent book. A lot of explanation of that. That's just my opinion. It's my opinion. I'm sure some people have done well with it. So, but the things he recommends, which I agree with, watch the glycemic index, where in the glycemic index your foods are. So use a carb counter. Eat whole vegetables instead of drinking juices, because the juices have sugar. Eat the orange itself. Don't drink the juice. And don't overcook the vegetables, because it destroys most of the nutrients. Because vegetables are very dense in nutrients and lowest in sugar. So many of the recommendations are just are good, okay? But still, people question, is this a starvation diet for a period of time? And maybe they think after a while you get so hungry because you're not eating carbohydrates, and you start overeating, now become obese. Well, I'm sure there have been examples for that, but we're not talking about double-blind studies here, okay? So let's be open-minded. There's things to be learned in this book. And also they recommend, taking some additional omega-3, which is the essential fatty acid, which decreases cancer, decreases vascular disease, decreases arthritis, decreases depression, decreases type 2 diabetes. So to get some omega-3, either from fish or supplements or flax seeds, you can add it to your smoothie, is excellent. You need to be aware of that. And he doesn't recommend dairy very much, a small amount perhaps. And as I already mentioned, you can get the calcium from vegetables. You don't need to drink milk to get calcium. That's an old record. You don't need it. And a minimum of cheese products, because cheese products are 80% fat. So a small amount of cheese. Cheese is quite pervasive. They'll sneak it into things. So like this veggie omelet, egg white veggie omelet I talked about, I have it at this place in town here, and always come out with cheese. Occasionally, if I forget to tell the waitress no cheese in it. And So now let's go into, we've gone through two of these discussion. Let's start the Mediterranean diet, which to me probably is the best of the three. It's probably the best of the three. And let's go through history a little bit. And we're talking about the Mediterranean countries, Greece, Italy, Spain, Morocco, these countries around the Mediterranean. And it was noted around 1950, the Rockefeller Foundation went into Crete at the request of the Greek government to run a study on nutrition, because after the war they didn't have many animal products, they had many plants, and the people in the country thought people were getting unhealthy. Well, the Rockefeller Foundation ran the study, and to their surprise, they were eating a 61% plant diet, 7% animal foods, 38% fat. Olive oil was the main source of fat. Turns out to be as fairly healthy, but olive oil is 100% fat, but it has monosaturated fat, so it's not saturated fat, so it's a lot healthier. Then Ancel Keys, an American from Minnesota, went in there and studied. It's called the Six Nations Study. He studied the U.S. and the Mediterranean countries just to compare them, and had some very interesting findings. It was such a good study that he even sent nurses, dietitians into people's homes. Yes, I mean a beautiful study, beautiful study. And the things that he noted, that these people were eating very little processed food, whole grain bread, bread that weighed 5 pounds for a loaf, very healthy, and these people turned out to have very little vascular disease, very little cancer, so the animal products they're eating, it's very lean meat. They don't have hardly any animal farms because there isn't any farmland amount to anything. So the Mediterranean diet turns out to be a very healthy diet. I think we're sort of running out of time. I can't go into it more extensively, but I think the Mediterranean diet is a very good way of eating, and it's been proven. Ancel Keys in a 7-country study proved the point. In essence, it's like what I recommend: whole grain, legumes, fruit, beans, lean meat, essentially all you can eat. It'll turn your appetite off. This is really what I recommend. So I call it a nutrient dense, I call it a plant diet, but I think the Mediterranean diet, I think would be a good book to read, nice tables in it. And Ancel Keys ran follow-up studies for 10 years. He studied men 40 to 59. Found very little evidence of disease in the Mediterranean countries, but in the U.S., and also found countries where they had richer people who could afford meat product from animals, they were sicker. They were all sicker. And the secret there really was fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grain. They ate bread. Plenty of bread was whole grain. It was whole grain bread, not refined bread. And that was really the secret. And it was a way of life. It was a way of life with them. So it wasn't just the foods, but it was a way of life. Exercise, they did a lot of exercise. So in summary, I think this has been sort of a fascinating evening, at least to me. I hope it was to you, creating a culture of wellness, of eating right to avoid this mad, sad, toxic American diet that's killing us. We have too much vascular disease, too much cancer. The dementia also is a high rate in type 2 diabetic from eating the wrong food, higher cancer rates. Breast cancer could be cut 30% by eating a plant-based diet. That's in the literature. I can show the articles. Thank you very much for spending your evening with me. And we'll have some more shows like this. And I hope you read some of the books. And I'm open-minded. It's just my opinion. You get a book you want me to read, you get it to me. I'll meet you at Starbucks, and we'll discuss it. I'm learning all the time. I reread these books here recently and find the whole thing fascinating. Subject. We're just trying to get you healthy. And I hope you've learned something today. And check with your doctor. that he can follow you and watch your blood sugar drop as you're eating the right food. And we love you all. All we're interested, really, is your health, and that's my passion, as you can see. And I thank Newfoundland Hospital for giving me the opportunity to be the wellness medical director to try to promote this in the community, to create, what I'm trying to do is create a culture of health. We love you all. Namaste. See you at the next show.